250 stories in 250 were for Benjamin Franklin, the man who captured lightning and helped create a nation. Part 1. The moon is pouring silver. Hush now, my dear. Hush. The night has wrapped itself around the world like a soft, dark blanket. The moon is pouring silver through your window, pouring it across the floor, across the foot of your bed, across your closed eyelids. If you listen very carefully, you can hear the house breathing. A tiny creak. A gentle settling. The whisper of wind through the leaves outside, and you are breathing too. In and out. In and out. You are safe, my dear. You are tucked into your blankets like a small animal in its winter den. I am sitting beside you. The moon is watching from above. And tonight, we are going to tell a very long, very beautiful story about a man named Benjamin Franklin. Have you heard of him before? Perhaps you know that he flew a kite in a thunderstorm. Perhaps you know that he invented the lightning rod and the bifocal glasses and the Franklin stove. But tonight, my dear, I am going to tell you a different story about Franklin. Tonight, I am going to tell you how this old man, with his thin white hair and his round spectacles, helped a young country break free from a king and become a place where people like you could grow up free. But before we begin, let us do our breathing one. There is only the story, and the moon, and my voice. Are you ready, my dear? Then close your eyes a little tighter. Let your body sink into the mattress. We are going back more than 250 years. Back to a time when America was not yet a country. Back to a time when 13 colonies belonged to a king across the ocean. Back to a time when a boy named Ben Franklin was just learning to read. Part 2. Boston, 1706. The boy who loved books. Our story begins in Boston, Massachusetts, in the year 1706. The streets of Boston are narrow and muddy. Cows wander down the main road. Sailors shout from the wharves. The smell of salt water and fish and tar hangs in the air, and in a small house on Milk Street, a baby boy is born. His parents name him Benjamin. He is the 15th child of his father, the youngest son of a very large family. His father is a candlemaker and a soap boiler. That means he spends his days dipping wicks into hot fat and stirring cauldrons of greasy soap. It is not a glamorous job, my dear. But it is honest work. Young Benjamin, everyone calls him Ben, is a curious child. He asks questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do ships float? Why do candles burn? Why do some people have more than others? His father sometimes grows tired of the endless questions and says, Ben. His father sends him to school. Ben learns to read quickly, faster than any other child in his class. He falls in love with books, my dear. He reads every book he can borrow. He reads about adventures, about science, about ancient history, about faraway countries. He reads until his eyes ache and his mother calls him to dinner. But Ben's family is poor. They cannot afford to keep him in school for long. After only 2 years, his father pulls him out of school and puts him to work in the family candle shop. Ben spends his days cutting wicks, pouring tallow, and shaping candles. He does not complain. He is a good son, but inside, his heart aches for books. Night, after the candles are made and the shop is closed, Ben climbs up to his tiny attic room. He lights a single candle stub. He pulls out a book. And he reads. He reads late into the night, long after the rest of the city has gone to sleep. Sometimes he reads until the candle burns down to nothing and he is sitting in the dark, his eyes still moving across the words he has memorized at my dear. Do you know what Ben Franklin said later in his life? He said, "The doors of wisdom are never shut." As long as you are willing to learn, the world will teach you, and that is the first secret of tonight's story. No matter how poor you are, no matter how little school. Brother James, who runs a printing shop. An apprentice means Ben must work for his brother without pay for many years, learning the trade of printing. James is not a kind master. He is harsh. He hits Ben. He treats him more like a servant than a brother. Ben endures this for 5 years. But when he is 17, he can bear it no longer. One night, he packs a small bag with a few shirts, some stockings, and 3 large rolls of bread. He sneaks out of the house before dawn. He boards a ship heading south. My dear, running away was a dangerous thing to do. If his brother caught him, Ben could be punished severely. But Ben believed in himself. He believed he could make a better life somewhere else. He sails for 3 days. The ship lands in New York, but Ben cannot find work there. A kind old man tells him, "Go to Philadelphia. It is a growing city. A young printer might find work there." So Ben walks. He walks for miles through forests and across rivers. He is tired. He is hungry. His shoes are worn thin. But he keeps walking. Finally, he reaches Philadelphia. It is a Sunday morning. Ben is dirty, disheveled, and his pockets are empty. He buys 3 puffy rolls of bread with his last coins. He walks down Market Street, eating 1 roll and tucking the other 2 under his arms. A young woman named Deborah Reed is standing beside of him. Ben looks up. He sees her laughing. And he laughs too. He tips his hat and says, "Good morning, miss." That moment, my dear, is the beginning of everything. Ben finds work at a print shop. He learns fast. He works hard. He saves his money. Within a few years, he becomes the owner of his own printing press. He starts a newspaper called the Pennsylvania Gazette. He writes clever articles. He prints books and pamphlets. Philadelphia learns to trust Ben Franklin, and Deborah Reed? She becomes his wife. They love each other for the rest of their lives. My dear, Ben Franklin started with nothing. He ran away from an abusive brother. He walked into a strange city with dirty clothes and 3 bread rolls. And he built a successful life through hard work, cleverness, and kindness. That is the American story, my dear. You can start with nothing and become something. Part 4, the first story within a story. Sarah the candlemaker's daughter. Before I tell you about the great things Ben Franklin did for America, let me tell you a small story about a girl named Sarah. Sarah lived in Boston in the 1740s, about 30 years after Ben ran away. She was the daughter of a candlemaker, just as Ben had been. Sarah's family was very poor. Her father worked from dawn until dusk, dipping candles, but he never earned enough. The family had one treasure, a small book. It was a copy of Poor Richard's Almanac, written by a man named Richard Saunders. But Richard Saunders was not a real person, my dear. Richard Saunders was a pen name for, you guessed it, Benjamin Franklin. Every year, Franklin published this little book full of weather predictions, puzzles, poems, and clever sayings. Sarah's father had bought a used copy for a penny. Sarah read it over and over, until the pages were soft and the corners curled. In that book, she read a saying that changed her life. Well done is better than well said. That means, don't just talk about doing good things. Go out and do them. Sarah took those words to heart. She was only 10 years old, but she started helping her mother carry water from the well every morning. She helped her younger siblings dress. She swept the floor without being asked. She shared her tiny piece of bread with a neighbor's child who had even less. A neighbor noticed Sarah's kindness and told a wealthy woman about her. That wealthy woman offered to pay for Sarah to go to school. And Sarah, my dear, became the first person in her family to learn to read and write properly. She grew up to become a teacher. She taught hundreds of poor children in Boston, all because of a penny book and a saying from Ben Franklin. That is the second secret of tonight's inventions. Because Ben Franklin was not just a printer and a writer. He was also a scientist, what they called a natural philosopher in those days. Ben noticed things that other people walked right past. He noticed that dark-colored cloth gets hotter in the sun than light-colored cloth. So he advised people to wear light clothes in summer. That seems simple to us now, but it was a new idea then. He noticed that the wind often blows from the northeast during storms, even when the storm clouds come from the southwest. He figured out that storms rotate. That discovery helped sailors predict weather. He invented a new kind of stove, the Franklin stove, that heated rooms more efficiently and used less wood. He did not patent it. He gave the invention away for free, because he wanted people to stay warm, not to get rich. He invented bifocal glasses. When he got older, he could not see close up or far away clearly anymore. He grew tired of switching between two pairs of glasses. So he cut both pairs in half and glued half of each into a single frame. Now he could read his book and look at the street outside without changing glasses. That is the invention that millions of people still use today. And then, my dear, there was the electricity. In the 1740s and 1750s, people knew about electricity only as a party trick. You could rub a glass tube with rubbed them. He collected sparks in jars. He found that electricity could flow through some materials. He called them conductors, but not through others. He called them insulators. He invented new words that we still use today: battery, conductor, positive and negative charge. Then he had a bold idea. He wondered if lightning was a form of electricity. Lightning was terrifying to people. It struck tall buildings and trees. It killed people and animals. It started fires. No one understood it. Ben thought, if lightning is electricity, then I can capture it. So in 1752, he designed an experiment. He would fly a kite in a thunderstorm. The kite would have a sharp metal wire on top to attract lightning. The string would be silk, which does not conduct electricity, except for a short section of metal wire near the bottom. At the end of that metal wire, he tied a metal key. Dear, this experiment was very, very dangerous. If lightning struck the kite, Ben could have been killed. But he was curious. He wanted to understand the world. On a dark, stormy day, Ben and his son William went to a field outside Philadelphia. They flew the kite up into the storm clouds. Rain soaked them. Thunder roared. But no lightning struck the kite, not right away. Then Ben noticed that the loose threads on the kite string were standing up. Ben Franklin did not stop there. He used his discovery to invent the lightning rod, a metal rod mounted on top of buildings, connected to the ground by a wire. When lightning strikes, the rod safely carries the electricity into the earth instead of setting the building on fire. The lightning rod saved thousands of buildings and thousands of lives. And Ben Franklin never patented it. He gave it to the world for free. That is the third secret of tonight's story. Curiosity is not dangerous. Curiosity is a gift. Ask questions. Experiment. Learn. And then share what you have learned with others. Part 6. The second story within a story. Thomas the farmer. Now let me tell you about a farmer named Thomas. Thomas lived in Pennsylvania in the 1750s. He had a small farm with a wooden barn. In that barn, he kept his hay, his tools, and his two beloved horses, Star and Best. One summer, terrible thunderstorms rolled across Pennsylvania week after week. Lightning struck a neighbor's barn, and it burned to the ground in less than an hour. The neighbor's horses died in the fire. The family lost everything. Thomas was terrified. Every time he saw dark clouds, he ran to the barn and prayed. He could not afford to lose his horses. He could not afford to lose his hay. Then a traveling tinsmith passed through town. He had heard about Ben. Fee was small, but Thomas was poor. He counted his coins. Then he remembered his neighbor's burned barn. He paid the tinsmith. The tinsmith climbed onto the roof of the barn. He attached a metal rod to the highest point. He ran a metal wire down the side of the barn and buried the end deep in the ground. That night, another terrible storm came. Rain pounded the roof. Wind howled. And then, crack, lightning struck. Thomas and his family huddled in their farmhouse, expecting to see flames, but when the storm passed, Thomas ran outside. The barn was standing. The horses were safe. The lightning rod had done its job. Thomas fell to his knees in the wet grass and thanked God. And Benjamin Franklin, years later, Thomas's grandson, grew up and became a blacksmith. He made lightning rods for every house in his town. He always told his customers, "This is called a Franklin rod. It was invented by a man who wanted to keep you safe." My dear, that is how knowledge spreads. One curious person learns something. Then they share it. Then the people they share it with others. And soon, the whole world is safer, kinder, better. Part 7. The trouble with the king. Now, my dear, we must talk about something sad. Because while Ben Franklin was flying kites and inventing things, trouble was brewing between the Americans without giving them any representatives in the English Parliament. They sent soldiers to live in colonists' houses and eat their food. They stopped colonists from trading with other countries. The colonists said, "This is not fair. We are English citizens. We deserve the same rights as people who live in England." But the king and his ministers did not listen. They said, "You are colonists. You will obey." Ben Franklin was living in London at that time, as a representative of several colonies. He tried to talk to the king's ministers. He tried to explain the colonists' complaints. He tried to find a peaceful solution, but the ministers laughed at him. They called him a simple printer and told him to go home. Ben did not give up. He wrote letters. He gave speeches. He published articles explaining why the king's taxes were unfair. He became famous in England, not as a scientist, but as a voice for America. One day, a minister shouted at Ben, "How dare you question the king's authority?" Ben replied, quietly, "I question any authority that is unjust." My dear, those were dangerous words. In England, questioning the king could get you thrown into prison. But Ben was not afraid. He believed that all people deserve to be treated fairly. That is the fourth secret of tonight's story. Stand up for what is right, even you. About a young woman named Mary. Mary lived in Boston. She worked as a seamstress. She sewed clothes for a living. She was 23 years old, and she was very good at her job. But the new taxes imposed by the king made her life miserable. The king taxed every piece of paper, every sheet of glass, every pound of tea, every yard of fabric. Mary's customers could not afford to buy new clothes anymore. Mary's work dried up. She had to take in washing, scrubbing other people's dirty clothes in a wooden tub, just to afford bread. Mary was angry. But she was also scared. What could a young seamstress do against the King of England? One evening, Mary heard a neighbor read aloud a letter that Ben Franklin had written. The letter said, "They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." Mary had never heard words like that before. They lit a fire inside her. She did not march in a protest. She did not throw tea into the harbor. Instead, she started making clothes out of homespun fabric, cloth that she wove herself, from or grown by local farmers. She refused to buy English fabric anymore. She told her customers, "We can make our own. We do not need the king." Other seamstresses followed Mary's example. Soon, hundreds of women in Boston were wearing homespun dresses, could make their own fabric. They would not need to buy English cloth. The English cloth merchants would lose money. Mary never met Ben Franklin. But Ben's words had given her courage. And her courage, along with the courage of thousands of other ordinary people, helped push the colonies toward independence. My dear, you do not have to be famous to change the world. You just have to do the right thing, in your own small corner, every day. That is the fifth secret. Part 9. The Road to Revolution. By 1775, the situation had grown much worse. Soldiers had fired on a crowd in Boston. Colonists had thrown a shipment of tea into the harbor to protest unfair taxes. The king had sent thousands of red-coated soldiers to occupy Boston and punish the colonists. Ben Franklin was still in London, trying desperately to prevent a war. He was 70 years old now. He had spent almost 2 decades away from his home, his wife, who had died while he was gone, his family. He was tired. He was lonely. But he kept working. He met with the king's highest officials. He begged them to compromise. He said, "Give the colonists a little respect. Give them a few representatives in Parliament. Let them keep a small part of their money, and they will remain loyal." The officials refused. They called Ben a traitor. One official screamed at him in front of a room You will hear me. The colonists will not be bullied. If you push them too far, they will fight. And they will win." The official laughed. "Win against the greatest army in the world? You are a fool, Franklin." Ben turned and walked out. He knew then that war was unavoidable. So he packed his bags. He said goodbye to his English friends. And he sailed home to America. When his ship arrived in Philadelphia in May 1775, the city greeted him like a hero. The war had already begun. Just 1 month earlier, the first shots had been fired at Lexington and Concord. Ben Franklin, the old printer, the kite flyer, the inventor, was about to help create a new nation. Part 10, the Declaration of Independence. In June 1776, the Second Continental Congress met in Philadelphia, in the same red brick building where James Madison would later write the Constitution. The delegates were arguing about whether to declare independence from England. Some delegates were afraid. "If we lose the war," they said, "the king will hang us all." Other delegates were impatient. "We have already lost too many men," they said. "We must declare independence now." Ben Franklin was the oldest delegate. He was 70 years old. He had arthritis. He had gout. His hands hurt. But his mind was still sharp. When the debate grew heated, Ben stood up. "Of the king." A customer asked him, "Are you for the king or for America?" The tavern keeper said, "I am for peace." The customer said, "Then why do you keep the king's picture on your sign?" The tavern keeper said, "Because I have not yet found a picture of the peace I want." The delegates laughed. Then they grew quiet. Ben continued, "We cannot wait for a perfect peace. We cannot be afraid of the king's anger. We must do what is right. We must declare that we are free." On July 2, 1776, the Congress voted for independence. On July 4, they approved the final text of the Declaration of Independence. Ben Franklin was one of the 5 men chosen to write it, along with Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston. When they finished writing, John Adams said, "We will be remembered for this day." Ben replied, with his dry smile, "Yes, we will. Or perhaps we will be remembered for something else. Let us sign the paper and hope for the best." The Declaration contains the most famous sentence in American history. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. My dear, those words did not come from nowhere. They came from years of reading, said, "We must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately." He meant, if we do not stick together, we will be defeated. But if we stay united, we have a chance. Part 11, the 4th story within a story. A soldier named William. Let me tell you about a young man named William. William was a farmer's son from New Jersey. He was 20 years old when the Revolutionary War began. He had never fired a gun in his life. But he joined the Continental Army because he believed in liberty. The first winter of the war was terrible. William and his fellow soldiers had no warm coats, no boots. Many of them had no shoes at all. They wrapped rags around their feet and marched through snow. They ate fire cake, a miserable mixture of flour and water, cooked on a rock. William thought about deserting. He thought about going home, hiding in his father's barn, and hoping the war ended. One night, a letter arrived in the camp. It was a copy of a newspaper article written by Ben Franklin. The article was called The Way to Wealth. In it, Franklin wrote, "God helps them that help themselves." William read those words by the light of a smoky campfire. He thought about them all night. The next morning, he did not desert. He stayed. He fought at the Battle of Trenton. He fought at the Battle of Princeton. He was wounded at themselves. Every time he felt tired or discouraged, he looked up at that sign and remembered, "I helped myself. I stayed. I fought. I am free." My dear, Ben Franklin never knew William's name, but his words gave William the strength to keep going. Words have power. Your words, even the words you speak tonight, could give someone courage someday. Part 12. The Old Man in France. The war lasted 5 more years. It was not going well for the Americans. They had won some battles, but they had lost many more. They were running out of money, out of food, out of soldiers. The Continental Congress sent Ben Franklin to France. His mission: convince the French king to send money, ships, and soldiers to help America. Ben was 78 years old. He was in constant pain from gout. The voyage across the Atlantic Ocean was rough. The ship tossed for 2 months. But Ben arrived in Paris and began the most important diplomatic mission of his life. The French loved Ben Franklin. They saw him as a symbol of American simplicity and wisdom. He wore a plain brown coat and a fur cap instead of a powdered wig. He did not try to be fancy. He was just himself. Rich French ladies asked him to visit their salons. French scientists begged to meet the man who had captured lightning. French printers wanted to shake his hand. But the French king's secret meetings. He wrote witty letters. He hinted that America might make peace with England if France did not help, which would be terrible for France. Finally, in 1778, France agreed to help. French ships sailed to America. French soldiers joined the American army. French money paid for uniforms, guns, and food. Without Ben Franklin's work in France, the Americans might have lost the war. My dear, when you think of heroes, you probably think of soldiers with swords and generals on horses. But sometimes the hero is an old man in a fur cap, sitting in a French salon, drinking tea, and telling stories. Bravery comes in many forms. Patient, clever bravery is still bravery. Part 13. The fifth story within a story. A French girl named Colette. Let me finish the war stories with a small one about a girl named Colette. Colette lived in a small village in the south of France. Her father was a shoemaker. She was 12 years old when the French king decided to send soldiers to America. Colette did not know where America was. She had never seen a map. But she heard her father say, "The king is sending our soldiers across the ocean to help the Americans fight the English." Colette asked, "Why should we fight for strangers?" Her father said, "Because there is an old American man named Franklin who convinced the king it is in our interest." Colette socks. She and her mother made bandages from old sheets. She collected eggs from their chickens and gave them to the recruiting officer. Years later, after the war ended, a man came to Colette's village. He was an American soldier, now a farmer. His name was James. He had lost 2 fingers in the war, but he had survived. He told Colette, "I wore socks knitted by a French girl. I do not know her name, but I was warm because of her." Colette smiled. She never told him that she was that girl. But she went home that night and wrote in her diary, "Sometimes we help people we will never meet. That is what love is." My dear, that is the 6th secret. You can help people you will never see. Your small act of kindness, a pair of socks, a bandage, a kind word, might cross an ocean. Part 14. The Constitution again. After the war ended in 1783, the new United States was free. But as we learned in our story about James Madison, the country was not working well. The 13 states were arguing. The government was too weak. So in 1787, the Constitutional Convention was called in Philadelphia. Ben Franklin was now 81 years old. He was the oldest delegate. He was in so much pain that he had to be carried to the meetings in a sedan chair, a kind of box with poles, carried by 4 men. The convention, as we speech, but a short, quiet one. He said, "I have lived a long time. I have seen many assemblies. And I have noticed that when men argue for a long time, they stop listening to each other. So I propose that we begin each day with a prayer. Let us ask for help. Let us remember that we are not enemies. We are fellow citizens." Some delegates grumbled, but most agreed. And from that day forward, the convention began with a moment of quiet. Then, at the very end of the convention, when the Constitution was finally finished, Ben Franklin pointed to the carving of a sun on the back of George Washington's chair. He said, "I have often looked at that sun. I have wondered whether it was rising or setting. But now I know. It is a rising sun. It is a new day for liberty." Those were his last great words to the convention. A few months later, he went home to Philadelphia, tired and content. Part 15. The final years. Ben Franklin died on April 17, 1790. He was 84 years old. 20,000 people came to his funeral. The entire city of Philadelphia mourned. On his grave, the words he had written for himself when he was young, "The body of B. Franklin, printer, lies here." He did not ask to be remembered as a scientist or a statesman. He asked to be remembered as a printer. Because printing spreads knowledge, tradespeople start their own businesses. That money grew over 200 years. It has helped thousands of people. Ben Franklin also wrote a famous letter to a friend, in which he said, "The Constitution only guarantees the American people the right to pursue happiness. You have to catch it yourself." That means, freedom is a gift. But you still have to work. You still have to be kind. You still have to learn and help and try. Part 16. What Ben Franklin's story means for you. Tonight now, my dear, we must come back to your quiet room. The moon is still shining. The stars are still twinkling. Your blanket is still wrapped around you. You have traveled a long way tonight. You have walked the muddy streets of Boston in 1706. You have watched Ben Franklin fly his kite in a thunderstorm. You have sat in the candle shop with young Ben. You have heard the Declaration of Independence being signed. You have seen an old man in a sedan chair giving a speech about prayer. What does all of this mean for you? It means, my dear, that you can be curious. You do not have to be a genius. Ben Franklin was not a genius. He was just someone who never stopped asking questions. You can ask questions too. You can wonder why the sky is blue, why the moon follows you, why the candle flickers. Wonder is the beginning of everything. It means that you the door for someone. You can share your snack. You can say a kind word to a friend who is sad. Small usefulness is still usefulness. It means that you can be brave. Ben Franklin stood up to the most powerful king in the world. He did not have an army. He had only his words and his patience. You can stand up for what is right too. When you see someone being teased, you can say, "Stop." When you see something unfair, you can say, "That is not right." And it means that you can start small. Ben Franklin started as a runaway boy with 3 bread rolls. He became one of the most important people in history. You do not know what you will become. But you are starting now, in this bed, on this quiet night, listening to this story. That is a good start. Part 17. The light in the window. Before we say good night, let me take you back one last time. Back to Philadelphia. Back to the year 1790. Back to the last evening of Ben Franklin's life. He is lying in his bed, in his house on Market Street. His daughter, Sarah, is sitting beside him. The window is open. A soft spring breeze moves the curtains. Outside, the city is quiet. The moon is rising, the same moon that is looking at you right now. Ben reaches out and takes his daughter's hand. He says, "I have lived a good life. I have tried to be useful. I have tried to be kind. That is enough. Remember that I love books. And remember that freedom is a gift that each generation must choose to keep." Then he closes his eyes. And he falls asleep, not the sleep of death, not yet. But the sleep of a man who knows he has done his best. My dear, when you close your eyes tonight, I want you to pretend that you are that spring breeze. Float out the window. Float over the rooftops of Philadelphia. Float back in time. And whisper to that old man in the bed, "Thank you, Ben. Thank you for the lightning rod. Thank you for the words. Thank you for showing us that one person can make a difference." And then float back. Back to your room. Back to your bed. Back to my voice. Part 18. The final good night now. My dear, you are tired. I can feel it. Your breathing has slowed. Your eyelids are heavy, heavy, like 2 flower petals at dusk. The moon is your lantern. The stars are your night lights. History is your blanket. Remember the secrets we learned tonight. The doors of wisdom are never shut. Always keep learning. Well done is better than well said. Do good things, don't just talk about them. Curiosity is a gift. Ask questions. Experiment. Wonder. Stand up for what is right, even when it is dangerous. You do not have to be famous to change the world. Just do the right thing in your own corner. Small acts of kindness can cross oceans. That began with a runaway boy with 3 bread rolls, and a kite in a thunderstorm, and an old man in a sedan chair who refused to give up. Sleep, my dear. Sleep without fear. Sleep like Ben Franklin slept on his last night, knowing that you have done your best, and that tomorrow is another day to be curious, to be useful, and to be kind. Good night, my dear. Good night. May your dreams be filled with kites dancing in stormy skies. May you see small sparks jumping from iron keys. May you hear the creak of a printing press and the whisper of pages turning. May you meet a boy named Ben, covered in candle wax, reading by a single flame, and when you wake tomorrow morning, look out the window at the sun. That is the rising sun.